Do you know anyone who wants a child? That was the question asked on a frozen Boston night outside a restaurant where the rich came to hide behind candlelight and crystal glasses. Not for money, not for food. Just a place where no one would hurt her. Some stories entertain you. This one gets under your skin. Because beneath the power, the luxury, and the danger, this is a story about what happens when a child stops asking to be loved and starts asking to be tolerated. Picture the sleet, the black cars, the harbor wind cutting through silk and cashmere, and one little girl barefoot on the stone clutching a torn bunny like it's the last soft thing left in the world. Stay with me because this story doesn't just break your heart. It shows you what it takes to rebuild one. Like this video and tell me in the comments where you're watching from. That question stayed in the air even after Roman Holloway rose to his full height, as if the winter itself had gone still to hear what kind of man he would be next. Cal Brennan opened the glass door, and the warmth from Velvet House rushed out into the Boston sleet in a soft, golden wave. Lily did not move right away. She stood under Roman's coat as if she had been wrapped in something too expensive to touch her small fingers clutching the torn rabbit against her chest, her bare feet already losing feeling on the wet stone. The doorman looked at Roman for direction. Roman did not raise his voice. He never had to. Inside, he said. Lily lifted her eyes to his face. They were blue, but not the bright, easy blue of childhood. These were winter eyes, careful eyes. Eyes that had learned to search a man's mouth before trusting his words. She took one hesitant step toward the entrance, then stopped again when she saw the polished marble floor. "I'll make it dirty," she whispered. The words landed harder than if she had screamed. Cal crouched a little enough to make himself smaller. It did not come naturally to him. He was a heavy-shouldered man in a black suit with a flattened nose and old scars in his knuckles, the kind of man strangers avoided on instinct. But when he spoke to her, his voice came out rough and unexpectedly gentle. "The floor can be cleaned." Lily looked down at her feet, red and raw against the black stone threshold. "I don't want anyone mad." No one in the entrance hall breathed for a beat. Roman stood a few feet away, rain still shining in his dark hair, white shirt collar damp beneath the open neck of his coatless jacket. He had spent 20 years building a reputation so absolute that men changed their stories when his name entered the room. He had seen fear in every form. He knew the sharp kind, and the foolish kind, and the greedy kind. This was something else. This was the fear of a child who believed mess had consequences she could not survive. Roman walked back to her, bent down again, and lowered himself until he was level with her face. "Lily," he said quietly, testing the name as if it mattered. "Look at me." She did. "No one is going to be mad at you for walking." For a long second, she searched him. Rainwater slid from the edge of his hair down one temple. Beyond him, the lobby glowed all gold and honey and warmth, the sort of warmth Lily had probably learned not to trust. Then very carefully, she stepped over the threshold and onto the marble. She walked on the front edge of her feet, trying to leave as little of herself behind as possible. The dining room of Velvet House breathed around them in soft layers. Crystal chandeliers, white linen, low light skimming across polished glass, the muted silver of flatware, jazz moving like smoke through hidden speakers, the scent of garlic butter, cedar, red wine, truffle perfume, wool, and money. Wealth sat in every corner without ever needing to announce itself. Conversation faltered table by table as heads began to turn. The nearest waiter stopped mid-step with a bottle of Barolo in hand. A woman in emerald silk lowered her champagne flute. Two men in navy suits near the bar went silent at the sight of Cal guiding a shivering little girl wrapped in Roman Holloway's coat through the center of the room. Whispers lifted like ash. Roman ignored every one of them. So did Cal. Lily heard them anyway. Roman could tell by the way her shoulders drew in and her chin dipped lower. She kept moving one tiny step at a time, clutching the rabbit so tightly its torn ear bent backward. Halfway across the room, Elaine Porter intercepted them. Elaine was tall, exact, and composed in the way some women wore pearls. Her dark hair was wound into a sleek knot at the nape of her neck. Her suit was charcoal-fitted, clean-lined, and severe enough to function as armor. She had managed Velvet House for 8 years, and had developed the rare talent of making rich men lower their voices with one glance. "Roman," she said in the calm, clipped tone that meant she was 1 degree from outrage, "we are at capacity tonight." Roman did not slow. Elaine's eyes flicked to Lily. Whatever she had prepared to say next died there. The child was trembling so badly the oversized coat shook around her. One small foot left a faint gray print on the marble. Cal answered for Roman without looking at Elaine. "Call Dr. Whitman." Elaine's expression sharpened. "Now." Roman stopped and turned his head. "Just enough. Now." That was all. Elaine glanced at Lily again. The girl looked up at her with all the exhausted caution of a stray animal deciding whether the hand extended toward it would feed or strike. Something in Elaine's face shifted subtle as a curtain moving in a draft. She stepped aside. "I'll bring her upstairs." Roman's answer was immediate. "No, I will." And for those who knew him, that was the first true shock of the night. Roman never carried problems personally. Roman delegated. Roman directed. Roman moved pieces from a distance and let the city arrange itself around his will. That was how power stayed power. But he was already walking again, leading Lily past the edge of the dining room toward the service corridor with Cal behind them and the hush of 100 curious eyes pressing at their backs. The corridor beyond the dining room was narrower, quieter. Stainless steel doors, warm tile, the humid breath of the kitchen rolling outward in fragrant waves. Staff paused as Roman passed. A line cook nearly dropped a pan. A dishwasher stared openly. A prep chef went pale and snapped straight as if Roman had entered a church instead of a back hall. They climbed one private staircase and then another. Roman opened a door on the 3rd floor to a suite used only for protected guests and private meetings too delicate for the restaurant floor. The room beyond was simple by the standards of Velvet House, but luxurious by any sane measure. A sitting area with a cream couch. Walnut side tables. A bedroom beyond with fresh sheets turned down. A bathroom lined in pale stone. A small fire flickering behind glass in the wall. Lamps casting low amber light instead of anything harsh. Lily stopped in the doorway. The room stunned her in a way Roman recognized. Not greed, not delight. Something much sadder. The look of someone standing before abundance and assuming it was meant for somebody else. On the coffee table sat a carafe of water and a plate of rolls that had been brought up by some quick-thinking member of staff. Lily's eyes went straight to the bread. She looked away from it just as fast. Roman noticed. Of course he noticed. "Stay here for a few minutes," he said. "You'll be warm." Lily turned toward him, her mouth parting as if she expected conditions to follow. When none came, she shifted her grip on the rabbit and whispered, "I'm sorry about the floor." Roman stood very still. From somewhere behind him, Cal exhaled softly through his nose. Roman's gaze lowered to Lily's face. Her bruise was worse under real light. There was a yellowing half-moon on her jaw, a faded mark at the base of her throat. Dirt traced the angle of her neck. Her hair had been cut badly, not by style, but by necessity or cruelty. One side was longer than the other. The ends looked hacked off. He had seen bodies in alleys. Men with split lips and broken fingers dragged in after deals went wrong. Women with panic in their eyes and blood on their dresses trying to disappear before dawn. But the thing that reached into his chest was not the bruise, not the hunger, not even the feet. It was the apology. A child apologizing for having existed in a place too expensive for her. His voice came out lower than usual, rough at the edges. "Don't apologize for that." Lily did not seem to know what to do with the sentence. It floated between them like a language she had never been taught. Cal stepped back toward the hall, already pulling out his phone. "I've got Nora on the way." Roman nodded. When the door closed behind them, Lily remained just inside the suite, with the coat hanging off her narrow shoulders, as if she expected the walls themselves to reject her. Roman and Cal stood in the hall for a moment in silence. Then Cal spoke without preamble. "You want me to run her?" Roman stared at the closed door. Everything he said. Name, missing persons, shelters, hospitals, juvenile services. "I want every camera within 5 blocks of this place pulled by midnight. I want to know where she came from, how long she's been outside, and who put hands on her." Cal's face hardened. "You think somebody's looking for her?" Roman's jaw flexed once. "Maybe. And if they are," Roman finally looked at him, "then I want to know what kind of men they are before they know where she is." Cal gave one short nod. He understood the tone. Cold, focused, dangerous. Roman had not raised his voice. He never did when he was closest to fury. At the far end of the corridor, Elaine appeared with a folded towel, a small basin of warm water, and a pair of thick socks that clearly belonged to no one on the third floor. She stopped when she saw the two men in silence outside the door. "I found these in staff lockers," she said. "They'll be too big, but better than nothing until someone gets shoes." Roman took the items from her hands. Elaine blinked. Cal nearly smiled. Roman opened the door and stepped back into the room. Lily had not moved far. She stood beside the couch as if she had not decided whether sitting on it might be a punishable offense. When she saw Roman return, her fingers tightened again around the rabbit. He set the basin towel and socks near the fireplace. Then he moved a little away from them so he would not seem to be advancing. "You can sit," he said. She looked at the couch. "It's clean. It will survive." A small crease formed between her brows, and for the first time there was something almost childlike in her face. Confusion. Not fear, exactly. Confusion at the idea that objects could matter less than she did. Slowly, she crossed to the very edge of the couch and perched there without leaning back. Roman stayed standing for another second, then chose the chair opposite her and sat down with deliberate ease, one forearm resting on his thigh. No sudden motion, no crowding. Lily's gaze kept sliding toward the rolls. "Are you hungry?" he asked. Her answer came too fast. "No." Roman glanced at the untouched water, the bread, the way the muscles in her throat moved when she swallowed. "Lily." A pause. She looked up. "You don't have to earn food here." The room went still. She stared at him as if the sentence itself hurt. Then very quietly she said, "I know how to be careful." Roman felt something cold settle behind his ribs. He had not asked what that meant. He did not need to. A child only said that if somebody had taught her that hunger was a behavior issue. "Take the bread," he said. Her eyes lowered. "Can I save some for later?" Roman leaned back in the chair and studied her, the rabbit, the too large coat, the way she sat balanced on the edge of departure. "You can have more later." Lily looked honestly uncertain whether that could be true. But after a moment, she slipped from the couch, walked to the table, and picked up one of the rolls with both hands. Not tearing into it, not even sniffing it first. Just holding it for a second, like a person checking whether a gift might be taken back. Then she bit into it, small bite, careful chew, eyes closing for half a second as though her own body had betrayed her by enjoying it. She took another bite faster, then another. Roman looked away to give her privacy, though privacy had likely been in short supply in her life. He watched the fire through the glass. Reflected in it, faint and shifting, he could see the shape of her hunched shoulders. His phone vibrated once in his pocket. He ignored it. Lily had finished half the roll and stopped. Not because she was satisfied. Roman knew the signs. She was rationing, saving the rest for uncertainty. The knock came 20 minutes later. Dr. Nora Whitman entered with a leather case, damp curls escaping the knot at the back of her neck. Wire frame glasses flecked with rain. She took in Roman in the chair, Lily on the edge of the couch. The half-eaten bread, the socks untouched, and understood immediately that this was not going to be a standard call. "Roman," she said. "Nora." Her eyes moved to Lily and softened. She crouched down without hesitation, setting the bag beside her. "Hi there, my name is Nora. I'm a doctor." Lily shrank a little into Roman's coat. Nora kept her tone even and light. "You don't have to talk to me if you don't want to yet. I just want to make sure you're all right." Lily's mouth twitched. The word "all right" clearly belonged to other children. Nora did not reach for her. Not immediately. She noticed the bruising, the trembling, the half-hidden feet, the way Lily tracked every shift in adult posture like a prisoner reading the room before a beating. Roman rose from the chair and moved to the wall, close enough to remain visible, but far enough not to trap the child between adults. Nora spoke about harmless things first. The weather, her drive over, the rabbit in Lily's lap. "What's your bunny's name?" Lily hesitated. Then, almost embarrassed by her own answer, she said, "Mopsy." That's a very serious bunny name. A tiny movement at one corner of Lily's mouth. Not quite a smile. The shadow of one. Nora held out her hand, palm up. "Can I look at your feet first? They must hurt." Lily's body went rigid. Nora stopped at once. "No rush," she said quietly. Roman recognized the change in Lily before Nora did. Her breathing had gone shallow. Her shoulders had inched high under the coat. Every muscle had begun to brace. He pushed off the wall and came halfway across the room, then lowered himself to one knee at a careful distance from the couch. "Lily." She looked at him immediately. That alone told him something. "She needs to help you," he said. "Nothing happens unless you say yes." Her voice was almost soundless. Will you stay? Roman held her gaze. Yes. Till she's done. Yes. Something in her loosened, only a fraction, but enough. Nora looked at Roman once over Lily's head. A message passed there. Stay exactly where you are. The exam took time. More time than Roman expected and far more than he liked. First, Nora managed to warm Lily's feet in the basin with the towel around them. Lily winced at the contact, then jerked back at the pain of returning sensation. Roman stayed kneeling where she could see him, one hand resting against his own thigh, visible and still. No reaching. No comforting by force. Nora asked permission before every motion. Can I move the coat? Can I look at your arm? Can I listen to your breathing? Can I see your back? Every yes came after a pause, as if Lily were translating trust into a language her body could understand. As the layers came back, the room changed. The bruise beneath her eye was only the beginning. Purple shadows along her ribs. Yellowing marks on her upper arms that looked too much like fingerprints. A healed burn on the inside of one forearm. Another on her thigh. One fingernail growing in jagged where the old one had been torn away. Faint rope-like lines across the small of her back that made Nora go very quiet. When Nora pressed lightly along Lily's side to assess an old injury, Lily flinched hard and bit down so fiercely on a cry that Roman's hands closed into fists at once. Nora did not look at him. How long has this spot hurt? Lily shrugged. Nora tried a different question. A little while or a long while, Lily's eyes stayed on the floor. I don't know. Roman knew then that pain had been the weather of her life long enough to lose shape. Nora listened to her lungs, checked her pulse, peered into one pupil and then the other, felt the sharpness of her wrists, the ridge of bones too close beneath skin. The belly of a child underfed so long her body had forgotten there could be enough. Halfway through, Lily began to sway with exhaustion. Roman stood and crossed to the side table, poured water into a glass, and brought it back. He did not hand it directly to her. He set it where she could take it herself. She noticed that. She noticed everything. By the end of the exam, Nora was pale beneath her composure. She helped Lily into the thick socks and adjusted Roman's coat back around her shoulders. Not as a symbol now, but because the girl was still cold all the way through. I'm going to get some cream for your feet and something easy on your stomach, Nora said. Very small portions at first. All right? Lily nodded because it seemed expected, though clearly she understood almost none of the implications. Roman walked Nora into the corridor and closed the suite door behind them. For a moment neither spoke. The hum of the building moved around them. Distant clatter from the kitchen below, footsteps somewhere on the stairs. The muted pulse of music from the dining room beneath the floorboards. Nora removed her glasses and pressed a finger to the bridge of her nose. Say it, Roman said. Her gaze lifted. Severe malnutrition. Her feet are developing frost injury, but I think we got to it before permanent damage. Multiple bruises in different stages of healing. At least 2 healed burns. One old rib fracture on the left side that was never treated. Scarring across her back consistent with repeated strikes from a belt or cord. Roman did not move. Nora knew him well enough to hear the danger in that stillness. This is not one bad night, she said. This is prolonged abuse. The corridor seemed narrower. How old, Roman asked. 6, maybe 7, small for her age. Roman looked at the closed door. Through it, faintly, he could hear the rustle of the coat as Lily shifted on the couch. Nora's voice lowered. There's more, Roman. He waited. She expects violence. Her whole body telegraphs it. She flinched before I even raised my hand the first time. She apologizes before she asks. She is trying not to take up room. That kind of conditioning takes time. Cal appeared at the far end of the corridor, phone still in one hand, face unreadable. Roman turned. Tell me. Cal walked up, kept his voice low. No immediate hit in missing persons with the name Lily Bennett in Massachusetts. Could be false name. Could be unreported. Could be out of state. Cameras outside caught her coming on foot from the waterfront about 12 minutes before she reached us. No adult with her. No obvious tail. We're still pulling street footage. Roman nodded once. Cal looked from Roman to Nora. How bad? Nora answered before Roman could. Bad enough. Cal's jaw tightened. Elaine arrived next with a tray. Broth, dry toast, bananas, a child-sized shirt and drawstring pants from somewhere in the staff housing closet. She took one look at Nora's face and asked no questions. Roman opened the suite door and went back in first. Lily was exactly where he had left her, except now she was no longer perched. Exhaustion had folded her into the corner of the couch. The rabbit rested beneath her chin. The half-roll had disappeared. He noticed the crumbs tucked into the pocket of his coat. Of course she had hidden some. He set the new tray down and, without drawing attention to the pocket, took the chair opposite her again. Elaine placed the folded clothes in the bedroom doorway and said with professional calm that somehow made room for kindness. "There's a bathroom through there. Hot water, towels. I can help if you want." Lily looked at the floor. Elaine added, "Or I can wait outside the door and you can do it yourself." A beat. Then Lily whispered outside the door. Elaine nodded as if this were the most natural arrangement in the world. Roman stayed seated while Lily went into the bathroom clutching the rabbit and the fresh clothes. The door clicked but did not latch. Warm water ran. Stopped. Ran again. Stopped. Roman imagined her staring at clean towels, clean soap, a real mirror. The simple violence of kindness when a child has gone too long without it. After several minutes, Nora came back to leave ointment and children's pain medicine. Elaine remained in the hall. Cal disappeared downstairs to keep pulling threads. Roman waited. He was not a patient man by nature. Patience in his world often got men buried. But this felt different. This was not patience for leverage. This was patience because one wrong movement could send a child running straight back into the night. When Lily came out, her wet hair hung in uneven strands around her face. The borrowed shirt swallowed her shoulders. The pants were rolled 4 times at the ankle. She had washed the dirt away, but no amount of warm water could soften the hollowness beneath her cheekbones. She stopped when she saw Roman still there. "You stayed." It was not gratitude, it was surprise. Roman looked up from the chair. "I said I would." She stood very still, absorbing that. Then her eyes went to the tray of soup, to the bed in the next room, to the fire, back to him. "Can I sit on the floor?" she asked. Roman glanced at the rug, thick cream wool spread before the fireplace. "If that's where you're comfortable." She crossed to the corner nearest the couch and lowered herself there with practiced efficiency. Knees up, rabbit tucked under her chin coat around her shoulders again. A corner. A wall at her back. A view of the door. Roman understood more from that choice than he would have from an hour of testimony. He stood, took the tray from the table and set it not too close, not too far within reach of the corner she had chosen. "There." Lily looked at the soup. "For me, yes. Do I have to finish it?" Number. That question hit him almost as hard as the first one outside. She nodded slowly and took the spoon. Each bite was tiny, disciplined. Roman knew the body of a starving person could reject too much too fast, but he also knew this was habit. Control, survival shaped into etiquette. He should have left then. He had calls to return. Men waiting downstairs. A city that never stopped asking him to decide things. Instead, he stayed in the chair by the fire while Lily ate enough to satisfy Nora's instructions, and then wrapped the rest for later without asking permission. He pretended not to see where she tucked the napkin bundle. At some point, her eyes began to lower with sleep. The soup cooled. The rabbit slipped a little against her chest. Roman rose and crossed only halfway. "There's a bed." She looked at the bedroom opening as if it led to a trap. "I'm okay here." Roman did not insist. "All right." He dimmed one lamp and left the others burning warm. When he turned toward the door, Lily's voice stopped him. "Mr. Holloway." No one called him that unless they wanted something from him. He looked back. Her eyes were already half closed, the blue gone softer in the firelight. "Why did you stop?" Roman said nothing at first. The truth came to him not in words, but in an image. A black van. A hand slipping from his sister's screaming voice swallowed by a city that never gave her back. He could not tell that to a child half asleep on his floor. So he answered with the only thing simple enough to be true. "Because I heard you." Lily seemed to think about that. Then she curled more tightly into the corner, one hand fisted in the coat, and sleep took her in ragged pieces. Roman left the room without a sound and pulled the door almost shut. Cal was waiting at the end of the hall. "No hit yet," Cal said. "But I've got a partial trail from the waterfront cameras. Looks like she came off the bus terminal side." "Alone the whole way?" Roman looked through the thin slice of light at the floor inside the room where Lily slept in the corner instead of the bed. "Set 2 men on this floor," he said. "No one comes up without my say." Cal nodded. Roman should have gone to his office. Instead, an hour later, when the dining room had emptied and the last black car had pulled away from Velvet House, he found himself walking back to the third floor in stocking feet with a glass of bourbon he never drank. Light still glowed beneath the suite door. He stood there for a moment, then eased it open a fraction. Lily was not in the bed. She was exactly where he had known she would be. Curled in the far corner of the sitting room, wrapped in his coat, the rabbit clutched beneath her chin, one sock half slipped down her heel. The untouched bed gleamed in the next room like a place arranged for another life. Roman watched her from the doorway, all that velvet warmth below, all the power in his name, all the men who would kill at a nod from him. None of it could teach a child to believe a room was safe in one night. He closed the door almost entirely, then dragged a chair from the hall and set it outside. The chair legs made a soft scrape over the carpet. He sat down facing the door. The building settled around him. Pipes shifting, heat moving through old walls, a distant laugh from the staff staircase. Somewhere down below, Frankie cursing in Italian at a pan left soaking too long. The city beyond the windows breathing in sirens and harbor wind. Roman leaned back in the chair, forearms on his knees, and looked at the thin line of light under the door. He had once been 16 and powerless. He had once held on as hard as he could and still lost the small person who trusted him most. 22 years had taught him how to become a man no one stole from again. And yet here he was, sitting outside a locked door in the middle of the night because a little girl had asked if anyone wanted a child. Sometime near dawn, Elaine came up the stairs with her heels in one hand and froze when she saw him in the hallway. She looked from Roman to the door and understood without asking. "You're still here," she said quietly. Roman's eyes stayed on the strip of light. "Yes." Elaine studied him for a long second, then set her shoes down on the floor and lowered herself into the chair across from him. For a while they sat in silence like two sentries posted outside something fragile. At sunrise, the light beneath the door softened. Inside, Lily still slept in the corner, and outside, without anyone saying it aloud, Velvet House had already begun to rearrange itself around the smallest guest it had ever taken in. By the time the harbor light turned from black to pewter, Lily had become the quiet center of a building that had spent years revolving around power, money, and discretion. The first person to find her after sunrise was Frankie Russo. He came into the kitchen at 5:15 with a paper cup of espresso in one hand and his reading glasses sliding down his nose, muttering to himself about produce deliveries and the criminal laziness of men who sliced fennel too thick. He was broad through the chest, thick in the waist silver at the temples, and loud in every room he entered except one. The moment he saw Lily sitting on a low stool near the pantry wall, his voice dropped. She had somehow made her way downstairs before most of the staff arrived. Roman's coat still swallowed her whole. Her damp hair from the night before had dried into uneven waves around her face. The stuffed rabbit was tucked beneath one arm. Frankie noticed two things at once. The first was that she was watching the room the way people watched exits in dangerous neighborhoods. The second was that she had positioned herself close enough to the trash bins to reach them. He set the espresso down on the prep counter and said nothing about either. Instead, he crossed to the walk-in cooler, took out eggs, butter, and a small ball of dough he had wrapped the night before, then moved through his kitchen with the unhurried certainty of a man entering church. A pan went on the flame. Butter melted. Bread hit the griddle. The smell rose warm and rich into the half-lit room. Lily watched every motion. Frankie cracked eggs with one hand and glanced at her over his shoulder. "You hungry, kiddo?" Lily looked at the floor. He understood right away that a direct question was the wrong tool. So he plated scrambled eggs, toast, brushed with butter and a few slices of banana. Then he set the plate on the stainless steel work table nearest her and sat on an overturned crate a few feet away as if he had all morning. "In this kitchen," he said, "we do not start the day with bad decisions." Lily looked from him to the food. Frankie picked up a second fork, stole a bite from the edge of the eggs, chewed, nodded once. "Not poisoned?" I checked. For the first time, a flicker touched her face. Not a smile, just the shadow of one trying to remember how. She slid from the stool and came closer, each step quiet and careful. When she reached the table, she did not sit. She remained standing, one hand on the rabbit, and ate in tiny, measured bites. Frankie pretended not to notice when she wrapped half the toast in a napkin and slipped it into the pocket of Roman's coat. Some things you let a child keep until she can let them go on her own. By 7, the kitchen had filled with the usual rattle of pans and clipped voices. A line cook chopping herbs paused when he saw Lily. A dishwasher slowed his rack just enough to stare. Frankie snapped his fingers once and everyone went back to work. "She's with us," he said. That was all the explanation anyone got. A little later, Elaine Porter appeared in the kitchen doorway with a flat white in one hand and a small paper bag in the other. Her suit this morning was navy. Her hair was as severe as ever, but she was carrying a bag from the drugstore across the street. She held it out to Lily. "For later," she said. Lily looked at the bag but did not reach for it. Elaine set it on the counter and opened it herself. Inside were a toothbrush, a child's hairbrush shampoo socks that actually looked her size, and a coloring book with a box of crayons pressed flat at the bottom. "I wasn't sure which colors you liked," Elaine said, "so I bought too many." Lily stared at the crayons as if Elaine had poured jewels onto the counter. Frankie looked away and began slicing tomatoes with unnecessary force. Roman came in a few minutes later. The kitchen did what every room in Boston seemed to do when Roman Holloway entered. It recalibrated. Backs straightened. Voices dropped. Attention sharpened. He had changed clothes since the night before. Dark slacks, crisp charcoal sweater, no tie, no coat. He looked more dangerous without formality softening the edges. His gaze found Lily at once. She froze for half a second at the sight of him, then lowered her eyes. Not with the blind terror from the night before. Something less absolute now, more like uncertainty. Roman noticed the plate, the crayons, the napkin bulging in his coat pocket. Frankie leaned one hip against the prep counter and folded his arms. "She's eaten some." Roman gave a short nod. "Good." Lily glanced up at him. Roman kept his distance. He always did. He stood 3 feet away and put a small paper pharmacy bag on the counter beside Elaine's. "Dr. Whitman sent ointment for your feet." Lily looked from the bag to him, then back down. "Thank you." The words were soft enough that Frankie almost missed them. Roman did not smile. He was not a man who smiled carelessly, but something in his face eased. Elaine opened the coloring book and slid it toward Lily. "If you'd rather stay up on the 3rd floor, I can set up a table for you there." Lily's fingers crept toward the crayons. She touched the yellow one first. "Can I stay here?" Frankie snorted softly. "Of course you can stay here. Somebody needs to make sure these people don't ruin breakfast." A few of the cooks laughed under their breath. Lily looked up at him with surprise so clear it was almost painful. Frankie turned away before she could see the change in his eyes. That morning set the rhythm for the days that followed. Lily became a dawn presence in Velvet House. She appeared in the kitchen before the city was fully awake, usually wrapped in one of the soft cardigans Elaine had brought from home, or one of Frankie's spare aprons folded over itself twice to fit. She sat on the same stool near the prep counter while Frankie worked and asked questions in a voice that rarely rose above a murmur. What was saffron? Why dough had to rest? Why soup smelled different after an hour? Why knives had to be sharpened if they already cut? Frankie answered every question like it mattered. Sometimes he let her stir sauce with both hands around the spoon. Sometimes he showed her how to dust flour over a board in a pale cloud. Once he shaped pizza dough into a rabbit with olive eyes and a cherry tomato nose, and Lily stared at it so long he thought she might not eat it at all. "Do you not like it?" he asked. She swallowed. "Can I look at it first?" He laughed, then loud and helpless. "You can look at it all day if you want." But after a minute, she took the smallest bite and closed her eyes. Frankie turned his face toward the stove because some things hit men harder at 60 than they ever did at 20. Elaine's affection came differently. It arrived in neat folded clothes left on the end of Lily's bed, in children's books stacked by the lamp, in a proper winter coat bought under the pretense of practical necessity, in a pair of red boots that made Lily stop in the middle of the room and stare at her own feet. "They're yours," Elaine said. Lily looked up too fast. "Really?" "Yes. For always." Elaine was a woman who disliked emotional displays on principle. She had spent years treating sentiment like a security risk. But at that question, she had to turn away and adjust a curtain that did not need adjusting. "Yes," she said. "For always." She also taught Lily things no one else would have thought to. How to hold a pencil without pressing hard enough to tear paper. How to sound out simple words from the children's books. How to brush her hair in sections instead of attacking knots all at once. How to ask for what she needed without apologizing before and after. That last one was the hardest. Lily apologized for everything. For water dripping on the bathroom tile. For coughing in the hallway. for standing in the wrong place, for not finishing milk, for breathing too loudly during one of Nora's checkups. The first time Elaine corrected her, Lily flinched. "Do not apologize for existing in a room," Elaine said. Lily went still. Elaine realized a second too late how sharp her tone had come out and softened it. "I mean it," she said quietly. "You don't have to do that here." Lily nodded, though the habit remained. Cal Brennan won Lily over by accident. He had been the hardest for her after Roman. He was too large, too silent, too visibly capable of violence. Scars lived openly on his hands, and his face made no effort at friendliness. So Cal did the only thing that worked. Nothing. He stopped trying to be reassuring and simply made himself predictable. He knocked before entering any room where she was. He announced himself in hallways so she would not startle. When he carried food up to the third floor, he left the tray on the table and stepped back before speaking. If she was in the kitchen and he needed to pass behind her, he always said, "Behind you, kid," in the same low voice. Predictability became safety, one repetition at a time. The first time she really looked at him without fear was in Roman's office. Roman had let her sit in the leather chair by the bookshelf while he worked through calls and contracts. She had a coloring book in her lap and one of Elaine's sharpened pencils tucked behind her ear. Cal came in to update Roman on a supplier dispute down at the docks and stopped when he saw the mess of crayons spread across the rug. Lily had dropped one beneath the edge of Roman's desk and was peering under it. Without thinking, Cal Bent reached down and picked it up. The movement made her recoil. Cal froze with the crayon pinched between two scarred fingers. Then very slowly he held it out. "Yellow," he said, as if identifying evidence. Lily stared at his hand, at the wax stick, at the scar over his knuckle shaped like a crescent moon. When she finally took the crayon, her fingers brushed his skin for less than a second, but she did not yank away. A week later, he showed her a ridiculous handshake he used with one of the bartenders downstairs. It started with a high five, turned into 2 knuckle taps, and ended with a nonsense flourish of fingers that made no sense at all. Lily watched him do it once with complete seriousness. Then she copied him, got it wrong, frowned, and tried again. When she got to the last part, Cal made an absurd clicking sound with his tongue. Lily blinked. Then a laugh escaped her before she could stop it. The kitchen fell quiet for half a beat. Frankie lifted his head from the stove. Elaine paused in the doorway. Even Roman across the room with a phone at his ear went still. The sound was small, not the easy laugh of a carefree child, but real, bright enough to cut straight through everyone who heard it. Lily looked startled by herself. Cal rubbed the back of his neck like he regretted nothing and said, "Don't tell anybody." She nodded solemnly. Secret. That was the beginning. Roman remained the slowest road. Lily no longer froze every time he entered a room, but she still watched him with the wariness of a child whose body remembered things her mind could not safely sort. She trusted his voice before she trusted his size, trusted his distance before she trusted his nearness. Roman seemed to understand that instinctively. He never stood over her if he could kneel or crouch instead. He never touched her without announcing the intention in his eyes first. If he entered a room she was in, he always let her see him before speaking. When she sat in his office while he worked, he kept the door cracked and the lamps warm and his tone even, whether he was discussing wine allocations or men who owed him money. At night, however, the damage rose. The first nightmare came 4 days after Lily arrived. Roman was in bed but not asleep. He had not slept properly since the night in the snow. The city spread beyond his windows in silver and black. His phone lay face down on the bedside table, ignored. When the scream hit the 3rd floor, he was out the door before the second one tore through the hall. He reached Lily's room first. The lamp had fallen sideways. The room was lit only by the bathroom light and the pale wash of the hall behind him. Lily was in the far corner, curled so tightly around herself she looked breakable, the rabbit crushed to her chest. "No," she sobbed. "No, please, I'll be quiet, I'll be good, please don't put me down there." Roman stopped 3 feet away. He did not rush. Lily. She was somewhere else. He crouched. "Lily, listen to me." The screaming cracked into gasping breaths. Roman kept his voice low and steady, not soothing exactly, but anchored. "You're at Velvet House, 3rd floor. Your room. There's a blue lamp by the bed. Elaine left your books on the table. Frankie burned the toast this morning because he was talking too much." Her rocking slowed. "The bathroom light is on. Your red boots are by the chair. You are not in a basement." Lily's breathing hitched. Her eyes flickered wild and unfocused, then began to find the room around her. Roman stayed where he was. No one locked the door. At that, she looked at him. Actually looked. Her face crumpled with the shame of being seen in terror. "I'm sorry." Roman's jaw tightened. No. Tears slipped down her cheeks. I tried not to scream. He stood crossed on the wall and turned on every light in the room. The lamps, the overhead, the bathroom. Warm gold poured into every corner until there was nowhere left for darkness to gather. When he came back, he sat on the floor with his back against the wall a few feet from her. Lily stared. "What are you doing?" "Staying here." She tightened her grip on the rabbit. "Why?" Roman looked ahead instead of at her, giving her the mercy of side-by-side space instead of direct concern. "Because nobody should be scared alone." She said nothing after that. Little by little, her shaking eased. Her breathing fell into a ragged rhythm. At some point, still curled in the corner, she drifted asleep again with one hand wrapped in the edge of his sleeve. Roman did not move. When dawn slid pale across the curtains, he was exactly where she had left him. Lily woke and blinked up at him. Her voice was thick with sleep. "You didn't go." Roman looked down. "I said I wouldn't." The crack that opened in her then was nearly invisible. But it was there. 2 days later, Lily came to his office on her own. Roman was at his desk, reviewing invoices he had already read twice without absorbing. The door opened a fraction, and her face appeared in the gap half hidden by the wood. "Can I come in?" He set the pen down. "Yes." She entered slowly, clutching the rabbit. The office was large, lined in dark wood and bookshelves, the windows opening toward the harbor. In another life, it might have intimidated adults. Lily crossed the room and climbed into the chair opposite his desk without being asked. Roman waited. She twisted the rabbit's torn ear around her finger. "I want to tell you something." His voice stayed gentle. "You don't have to tell me anything before you're ready." Lily shook her head. "I want to." He let the silence open wide enough for her to choose. When she finally spoke, the words came carefully, as if each one had splinters. "My mom's name was Claire." Roman said nothing. "She died when I was born." Lily's eyes remained fixed on the rabbit. "People said it wasn't my fault. But if I wasn't born, she would still be here." Roman felt something cold move through him. "My dad said she loved me anyway. He said she picked Mopsy before I was born." Her thumb brushed the rabbit's frayed ear. "He used to tell me that every time I asked." She swallowed. "Then he died too." Roman's hand stilled on the desk. "He worked with cranes at the shipyard in Fall River. A lady came to the house and told me there was an accident. After that, I went to live with my Aunt Tessa." She paused and for the first time looked up at him. Her blue eyes were enormous in her thin face. At first she was nice. Roman already knew from the tone that kindness in this story had a short life. "She let me sleep in a real bed. She made pancakes on Saturdays. She said I could call her Aunt Tess." Lily's voice began to flatten, not from calm but from distance. Roman had heard that tone in witnesses and survivors, in men describing things too ugly to revisit all the way. Then she married someone. Roman's jaw tightened before the name came. He was nice at first, too. He brought flowers and smiled a lot and told Aunt Tess I was sweet. She lowered her gaze again. Then he moved in. The room stayed silent except for the muted hum of traffic far below and the quiet turning of heat through the vents. Lily's fingers twisted harder in the rabbit's ear. "His name was Daryl Kane," she said. Roman did not interrupt her. He had learned that with people carrying this kind of pain, silence was often the only merciful thing in the room. Lily sat very still in the leather chair. Her knees drawn close, the stuffed rabbit crushed against her ribs, as if the worn fabric could brace her for the shape of memory. "At first he only yelled," she said. "At the TV, at the sink, at the mail, at Aunt Tess. At me if I dropped something or asked the wrong question." Roman kept his hands flat on the desk. He drank from brown bottles. A lot. Sometimes he would smile before he got mean. That was the worst part. When he smiled, it meant he was about to have fun. Her voice was not dramatic. That made it worse. She said it the way children described weather. Matter of fact, inevitable. "The first time he hit me, I spilled juice on the carpet." Roman stared at her. "I tried to clean it before he saw. I used my sleeve because towels were too far." She swallowed. "He said I was stupid. He hit me in the face. Then he made me stand in the corner for a long time and told me not to cry because crying made me ugly." A long quiet opened between them. Roman could hear the ticking of the clock on the far shelf, hear a faint horn drifting from the harbor below, hear his own pulse settling into something dangerous and precise. Lily looked down at the rabbit again. After that, it happened more. She touched the side of her forearm, not where the skin was clean now, but where the old burns lived beneath sleeves and ointment and healing. If I was too loud, he got mad. If I was too quiet, he said I was sneaky. If I ate too much, I was greedy. If I ate slow, I was wasting food. If I left crumbs, I was disgusting. If I asked a question, I was talking back. Roman's jaw tightened so hard a muscle moved in his cheek. There was a basement, she said. The air in the office changed. He saw it on her before the words were fully out. Her shoulders drawing inward, her chin lowering. That old instinct to make herself smaller before pain arrived. When he wanted to teach me something, he put me down there. Roman kept his voice low for how long? She shrugged with one shoulder. I never knew. Sometimes it felt like forever. He did not ask what that meant. He let her keep the shape of it. It was dark all the time. No windows. Just pipes and boxes and this smell like dirt and water and old metal. If he was mad enough, he locked the door and turned off the pull chain light before he left. Her fingers tightened on the rabbit's torn ear. At first I screamed. Then he said if I screamed again, I would stay longer. Her lips trembled once and then steadied, so I learned to be quiet. Roman looked at the view behind her without seeing any of it. Boston Harbor spread gray beyond the glass. Ferries cut white trails through dirty winter water. Men in cars moved along the avenue below with coffee cups in their hands, and no idea that one floor above them a little girl was calmly describing hell. He used a belt, Lily said after a while. Roman looked back at her. He said it helped me remember. The room was so still that even the heat vent sounded loud. And when I cried, she whispered he used cigarettes. Something in Roman's expression altered then. Not visibly enough for anyone but Cal or Nora to notice if they had been there. But inside him, something old and armored split open with the clean, cold force of a blade. Lily did not see it. She had already misread too many silences in her life. She hurried on, as if trying to make it easier for him to hear. I got better at being good, she said. I really did. I learned what floorboards squeaked. I learned how to wash my own plate before he came home. I learned how to eat less. I learned how to stay out of his way. Her eyes lifted to him, full of that terrible, exhausted sincerity children still carried even after the world had failed them 100 times. But it never worked. Roman's hands closed once, then opened. What about your aunt? Lily's face changed at that. Not fear this time. Something duller. A wound of a different kind. She knew. The words fell into the room without weight because all the weight was already inside them. She saw the bruises. She saw me limping. Sometimes she put medicine on my arms when he was asleep. A pause. Sometimes she cried. Roman said nothing, but she never stopped him. Lily's mouth pulled small and tight, trying to hold shape around betrayal. She told me I had to be patient. She said he was under stress. She said if I was extra careful, things would calm down. Roman almost laughed at that, though there was no humor in it. Calm down. As if monsters needed better weather to stop being monsters. One night I heard them yelling. Lily said, he lost money. A lot of money. He was saying I cost too much. He said if Aunt Tess wanted to keep me, then I should be useful. Roman's stillness deepened. Lily's fingers trembled over the rabbit's stitched eye. I was at the top of the hall. They didn't know I could hear. He said he knew people who would pay for a girl my age. Her voice dropped lower. He said I was young enough to be worth something. Roman lowered his eyes to the wood grain of his desk because for one brief moment he could not trust what was in his face. Lily went on in the soft, flat tone of a child reading her own obituary. I didn't understand all of it, but I understood enough. The harbor beyond the windows blurred. That night he fell asleep on the couch. Aunt Tess went to their room and shut the door. I waited until the TV got loud again because he always snored after the TV got loud. She swallowed. Then I climbed out of the basement window. Roman looked up. I didn't have shoes. He took them away because he said I hadn't earned new ones. I only had Mopsy because I kept her hidden behind the furnace pipe. Her eyes dropped to the rabbit. I walked until it got light. Then I kept walking. I slept behind a grocery store one night and under a loading dock the next one. I took food from trash cans when no one was looking. Some people stared at me. Some people told me to move. Nobody asked where I was from. She lifted her gaze again, and now there were tears standing in her eyes, though they did not fall. Then I saw your restaurant. Roman did not speak. All the windows were warm. Everybody inside looked like they belonged somewhere. her voice fractured. "And I thought maybe if I asked the right way, somebody would want me enough not to send me back." The silence that followed was absolute. Lily misread it at once. Her shoulders folded in, her chin dropped. Every line of her body went apologetic. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I know that's a lot. I just wanted you to know." Roman rose from behind the desk. Lily flinched on instinct. He saw it and hated himself for being large. So he slowed, circled around the desk one measured step at a time, stopped in front of her, and lowered himself until he was kneeling on the carpet at eye level. She was bracing for rejection. He could see it in the way she held her breath. Instead, he opened his arms. He did not crowd her, did not pull, just offered. Lily stared at him as if the gesture itself was impossible. Then, with all the careful uncertainty of a child crossing thin ice, she leaned forward. The moment her small body touched his, every restraint Roman had spent 20 years perfecting had to lock down all at once. She weighed almost nothing. She fit against him like something meant to be protected, and never was. Her hands fisted weakly in the back of his sweater. Roman put one hand between her shoulder blades and the other behind her head, and held her with a gentleness that would have shocked every enemy he had ever made. "He will never touch you again," he said quietly. Lily's breath shuddered in his shoulder. "You are not going back." A tiny sound escaped her, more felt than heard. "Do you understand me?" She nodded once against him. Roman eased back just enough to look at her face. "I mean it." Lily's eyes searched his with all the desperate caution of someone who had been promised things before. She found something there she did not know how to argue with. "Can I stay here?" she whispered. Roman did not hesitate. "Yes." "For how long?" "As long as you need." Her lower lip trembled. Then she nodded and pressed her face into his shoulder again, and for a few seconds the office held nothing but the sound of her trying not to cry. After that, the days found a shape. Lily stayed close to Frankie in the mornings, and closer to Elaine in the afternoons. She sat in Roman's office with her books and crayons when she did not want to be alone, which was often. She began sleeping on the bed some nights, though she still retreated to the corner whenever fear rose too high. Nora came every other day to check her ribs, her feet, her appetite, and the slow, shy return of color into her face. Cal moved around all of it like a silent wall, tightening security without making Lily feel watched. Roman let the building adjust around her. He had never noticed before how much noise a place like Velvet House made. Ice dropped into glasses. Doors sighed open and shut. Plates touched linen. Men laughed too loudly after a third drink. Women in expensive coats floated in on perfume and gossip and old money. Normally, none of it mattered. Now he found himself tracking every sound against the possibility of it reaching the third floor and pulling Lily back into fear. That was how the next fracture came. It was a Friday night, 3 weeks after the snowstorm. The dining room was full. The harbor beyond the windows glowed black and silver under a low sky threatening more weather. In the kitchen, Frankie was rolling fresh dough while Lily stood on her stool in a blue apron folded up at the waist, dusted with flour from chin to sleeves. She was asking serious questions about cheese. "So why is this one softer?" Frankie grated Parmesan with great disdain. "Because life is unfair and mozzarella has better instincts." Lily gave a soft huff that might have become a laugh. Then she looked through the little glass pane toward the front of the house and went still. The plate in her hand slipped from her fingers and shattered on the tile. Frankie turned at the crash. Lily was white, not pale. White, drained so completely she looked carved from wax. Her eyes fixed on something beyond him. Her mouth had gone slightly open, but no sound came out. Frankie followed her stare through the narrow service window. A man stood at the host stand near the entrance, speaking with polished ease to the young hostess in black silk. Tall and thin, cheaply expensive suit, slicked hair. The sort of smile that only lived from the teeth outward. Frankie did not know him. He knew enough. "Lily," he said. No response. "Kiddo, look at me." Nothing. She had gone somewhere else behind her own eyes. Frankie moved fast for a man his size. He came around the prep table, scooped her off the stool, and held her close as if she weighed no more than dough cloth and flour. Her body was rigid in his arms, not struggling, locked. In the dining room, Darrell Kane smiled at the hostess and laid papers on the stand. "I'm looking for my niece," he said smoothly. "Lily Bennett. Blonde hair, blue eyes. Sweet kid. She ran away from home and I've been worried sick." The hostess, Maria, glanced at the papers, then at the man's face, and some instinct made her keep her own expression neutral. I'm sorry, sir. I'm not sure I can help with that. Before Daryl could press harder, Elaine appeared at her shoulder. She took in the scene in one sweep. The papers, the smile, the false concern polished to a gleam. And you are Daryl Kane. He offered the practiced version of himself, open and sympathetic. I'm her legal guardian. Poor thing is troubled. She tells stories when she's upset. I was told someone may have seen her here. Elaine did not touch the paperwork. Her eyes remained on his face. I'll speak with the owner. Daryl's smile thinned by a degree. Please do. Elaine turned without haste and crossed the dining room, but her pace changed the second she disappeared into the service corridor. She found Roman halfway down the hall, already moving toward her because something in the kitchen had gone wrong, and every nerve he owned was now calibrated to that possibility. It's him, she said. Roman's entire expression flattened. In the front. Where's Lily? Frankie took her off the line. She saw him. Roman nodded once and kept walking. By the time he stepped into the dining room, the room itself had changed. The music still played. Wine still moved. But conversation had gone thin and uncertain, sensing a pressure shift none of the guests could name. Daryl turned as Roman approached. He recovered quickly. Men like him always did. A new audience only meant a new performance. Mr. Holloway, I assume. Roman stopped in front of him. I'm Daryl Kane. I apologize for the intrusion. I'm trying to find my niece. He extended his hand. Roman did not take it. Daryl lowered it slowly, smile never quite falling away. There's no one here by that name, Roman said. Daryl's eyes sharpened. I believe there is. She's been missing. We've been frantic. Roman looked at him the way a man looks at a stain on white linen. No, he said, you've been searching. For the first time, a crack appeared in Daryl's polished tone. I have legal custody. Roman's voice stayed very quiet. Interesting. Daryl leaned in a fraction, mistaking calm for negotiable. She is a disturbed child. She lies when she's upset. If someone here has hidden her, I can be understanding, but she belongs with me. Roman's gaze sharpened. Belongs. The single repeated word landed like a slap. Daryl sensed it too late. You know what I mean? Roman's face gave him nothing. Leave. Daryl blinked. I'm sorry. You heard me? The dining room had gone almost silent now. Guests pretending not to watch. Staff not pretending at all. Daryl straightened. Mr. Holloway, with respect, you have no authority to interfere in a family matter. Roman's voice dropped half a degree. You have 10 seconds to walk out of my restaurant before I have you removed. Daryl glanced around, finally noticing Cal where he had appeared near the bar and two more of Roman's men at either side of the room. Their presence was quiet, solid, final. He adjusted his cuffs with fingers that were not quite steady. This is not over, he said. I will come back with the police if I have to. Roman did not move. Daryl's smile curdled into something uglier. She's mine. I always get back what's mine. Cal was beside him before the last word fully landed. You're done, Cal said. Daryl let himself be steered toward the door because every surviving instinct in him had finally understood he was outnumbered. But before stepping into the winter dark, he turned his head and looked directly into Roman's eyes. You can't keep her forever. Then he was gone. Roman stood absolutely still for one beat longer. Then he turned and walked into the kitchen. Frankie was in the dry storage room with Lily on an overturned crate. The child folded into herself so tightly she looked painful to hold together. Mopsy was crushed beneath her chin. Her lips moved over and over around the same phrase. He found me, he found me. Frankie looked up as Roman entered. His broad face had gone gray with helpless anger. I couldn't get her to stop. Roman lowered himself to the concrete floor a few feet in front of Lily. Lily. No response. He found me, he found me, he found me. Roman let the first repetition pass. Then he said her name again more firmly. Lily. Her eyes lifted at last. The fear in them nearly undid him. Not because it was loud, but because it was resigned. The look of a child who had never truly believed safety could survive being tested. He always comes back, she whispered. Roman moved a little closer. He's gone. She shook her head. He'll come back with papers, or police, or somebody. Number. Tears stood in her eyes. Everybody says no until they give me back. Roman reached out slowly and set his hand on the floor between them, palm open, offering choice the way he always did. I am not giving you back. She looked at his hand, then at his face. He held her gaze. I don't care what papers he waves around. I don't care who he brings. You are not going anywhere. Something inside her gave way. She leaned forward in a rush and caught at his sweater with both hands burying her face against him. This time the crying came hard, not silent tears, not hidden ones. great, shaking sobs torn from somewhere deep and old and locked. Roman put his arms around her and let her cry all the way through it. Frankie turned away, one hand over his mouth. Later that night, after Lily had cried herself to sleep with Elaine sitting in the chair beside the bed, and Nora checking her pulse one more time, Cal came into Roman's office with a file. He set it on the desk and waited. Roman looked up. "Tell me." "Daryl Kane," Cal said. 52. Moved to Boston from Providence 6 years ago. Married Tessa Bennett 3 years back. Spotty work history. Multiple complaints. One assault charge from his first marriage that disappeared after the victim left the state. Roman opened the file. Cal kept going. "He's in debt, gambling, private lenders, some ugly names in the mix. He's also been collecting state support money meant for Lily. None of it shows up in anything that resembles care." Roman flipped a page. Bank statements, photographs, background checks, a copy of the guardianship paperwork. "There's more," Cal said. Roman's eyes lifted. "We got lucky with his phone records and one of the men he drinks with in Southie. Kane has been asking around. Not about schools or social workers." Cal's mouth hardened. "About buyers." Roman closed the file slowly. Cal watched him, measuring the silence. "You want him gone?" Roman stood and crossed to the window. The harbor below lay black under the city lights. Ferries moved like ghosts in the distance. "No," he said. Cal understood at once. "You want him to move first." Roman's reflection in the glass looked colder than the water. "I want proof he can't crawl away from." Cal nodded. By morning, there were 2 men on every exit that mattered, and another pair shadowing the block outside Velvet House. Lily did not know. Roman would not let fear become the architecture of her days if he could help it. For 4 days, nothing happened. Lily stayed close to Frankie, closer to Roman. She no longer sat with her back to open doors if she could avoid it. She slept in the corner again, wrapped in the red coat Elaine had bought her and Roman's old one folded nearby like a second wall. Then on the 5th afternoon, Frankie took her to the small waterfront park, 2 blocks from Velvet House. The snow had softened to a fine powder over the grass. Lily wore her red coat, her new boots, knit gloves, and a cream hat Elaine had chosen because it made her look like she belonged to somebody. Frankie walked beside her with a take-out coffee and a paper bag of chestnuts tucked under his arm. Lily had been pointing out birds. A gull on the railing, a pigeon trying to bully it off, the tiny stitched squeak of a squirrel darting along an iron fence. Then the black van came off the street too fast. It jumped the curb in a spray of slush and skidded toward the path. Frankie did not pause to think. He shoved Lily behind him so hard she stumbled back onto the snow and turned toward the van, with every old instinct he had left from a life before kitchens and saucepans. The side door flew open. 2 men jumped out. One came straight for Lily. Frankie swung first. His fist cracked against the man's jaw with enough force to send him sideways. The second man hit Frankie in the gut before he could recover. Air left him. A knee followed. He went down hard on one shoulder, coffee exploding across the snow. Lily screamed. The first man lunged for her. He got 2 steps. Then Cal's men came out of nowhere, from behind the park fence, from an idling sedan at the corner, from the path beyond the frozen fountain. They moved fast and clean and without wasted motion. One of them caught the kidnapper across the throat from behind and dragged him backward off his feet. Another slammed the second man into the side of the van hard enough to dent metal. Cal reached Lily last. He crouched in front of her but did not touch her. "Lily, it's me." She was shaking so violently her teeth knocked together. Mopsy was trapped under one arm. Her eyes were fixed on the van as if it had opened directly into every nightmare she had ever had. "They tried to take me," she whispered. Cal kept his voice level. They didn't. Frankie staggered upright with blood on his lip and murder in his face. "I'm all right," he snapped before anyone asked. "Check the kid." One of Cal's men held up a phone he had pulled from the first attacker's pocket. "Message just came in." Cal took it, looked once, and his expression changed. He dialed Roman immediately. Roman answered on the first ring. "Report." Cal watched Lily clutching the rabbit in both hands, her red coat bright against the snow. "They made their move," he said. 2 men in a van at Harbor Park. Lily is safe. Frankie took a hit, but he's standing. Roman said nothing. Cal looked down at the phone screen again. "And we have a text from Kane." The cold seemed to sharpen around him. "Read it." Cal did. "Take the girl. Don't bruise her face. She is worth more clean." Silence. Then Roman's voice came back quiet enough to be deadly. "Bring them in. Cal ended the call and slid the phone back into his coat. Snow still drifted through the park in thin white ribbons. One of the men from the van was on his knees with his hands zip-tied behind his back, blood running from a split lip onto the collar of his jacket. The other was face down in the slush, groaning every time he tried to breathe too deeply. Frankie wiped his mouth with the back of his hand and came toward Lily with one shoulder pulled a little higher than the other. "Look at me, kiddo." She did barely. "You're safe," he said. Her lips shook. They were going to put me in there. Frankie crouched down with a wince and held out both hands, palms up, the way Roman did. But they didn't. Lily stared at his face, at the blood, at the bruising already swelling near one eye. "I'm sorry." Frankie made a sound deep in his chest that was almost anger and almost heartbreak. "No," he said, "not one more sorry from you tonight." He opened his arms. She went to him all at once. Frankie held her tight, one broad hand over the back of her red coat, his eyes lifting over her shoulder to Cal. Cal had already turned away, giving orders in the clipped, quiet voice that made men move faster. One vehicle for the kidnappers, one vehicle for Frankie and Lily, one clean route back to Velvet House. No lights, no noise, no mistakes. When Lily arrived, Roman was waiting in the private third-floor corridor. He had not put on a coat, had not bothered with gloves. He stood in shirt sleeves with the dark city at his back through the stairwell window, hands at his sides, face unreadable to anyone who did not know him. Lily saw him and broke from Frankie before anyone could stop her. She hit Roman in the middle like a wave and clung to him with both arms around his waist. He bent at once, gathered her up, and held her against his chest as if she had every right in the world to be there. Her body was still shaking. "They came back," she whispered. Roman's mouth touched the top of her hat for one brief second. "I know. They were going to take me. They didn't." Her face pressed harder into him. Roman looked over her head at Cal. Cal gave a single nod. The message passed cleanly between them. The men had spoken. There was proof. Roman turned his head toward Nora, who had already come up from the first floor with her medical bag. "Check Frankie," he said. Frankie snorted blood from one nostril into a handkerchief. "I'm fine." Nora gave him a look that could strip paint. "No one asked you." Elaine stepped out from Lily's room with a blanket in her hands. Her face changed when she saw Lily clinging to Roman. No one commented on it. Elaine only came closer and said softly, "I warmed your room. The lights are on." Lily lifted her head just enough to look at Roman. "Don't go." Roman's hand moved once over the back of her coat, slow and steady. "I'll put you to bed first." She studied his face with the urgency of someone checking whether a promise had changed while she was looking away. Then she nodded. He carried her inside. Elaine pulled back the blankets. Nora took one look at Lily's pupils, her breathing the rigid set of her shoulders, and decided against questions for now. The child was not physically injured. What had been hurt tonight was older and harder to bandage. Roman sat on the side of the bed while Lily climbed under the blanket with Mopsy tucked beneath her chin. When he made a small motion to stand, her fingers closed around his wrist. He stopped. "Please." Roman looked down at her hand, small, cold, trembling. He sat back again. Elaine dimmed the lamps and left without a word. Nora went to tend Frankie. Cal disappeared down the stairs with the kind of silence that meant work had already begun elsewhere in the city. Roman stayed. Lily kept hold of his wrist until sleep dragged her under in pieces. Even then, her fingers twitched every few minutes as if some part of her was still making sure he remained solid. It was close to midnight when Roman finally eased free. He stood beside the bed for a long moment, watching her breathe. Then he turned and walked out. Cal was waiting in the office downstairs. The file on the desk had grown thicker since the afternoon. Roman did not sit right away. He poured 2 fingers of bourbon into a glass, left it untouched, and went to the window instead. Outside, the harbor was black iron under a low winter sky. Cal stood with one hand braced against the back of the chair opposite the desk. "The drivers are secured," he said. Both admitted Kane hired them. One of them started talking before we even got to the bridge. Roman kept his eyes on the water. "Good." Cal reached into his coat and set the phone from the park on the desk. The screen was still lit with the message. "Take the girl. Don't bruise her face. She is worth more clean." Roman turned then. The office always quiet seemed to tighten around that sentence. Cal let the silence hold for a moment before speaking again. "The one with the broken lip says Kane promised 10 grand if they brought her back alive and untouched. Said there might be more if a buyer came through." Roman crossed to the desk and picked up the phone. His expression did not change. That was what made Cal careful. "He's at a motel in Revere right now," Cal said. Paid cash for 2 nights. Our people have eyes on the lot. He thinks he still has time. Roman looked down at the message once more, then locked the screen and set the phone back on the desk with exact care. Bring him to Pier 9. Cal nodded. And California. He looked up. Roman's voice was very quiet. I want him standing when I get there. The warehouse at Pier 9 had once held imported machinery and stolen electronics, and in one ugly summer 10 years ago, 3 men who had forgotten which city they were in. Now it stood empty except for old pallets, rusted chains, the smell of salt and cold metal, and the kind of silence that belonged only to places built far from ordinary witnesses. Daryl Kane was already there when Roman arrived. His hands were zip-tied behind his back. His suit jacket was gone. His shirt clung damply to his back. Someone had cleaned the blood from his mouth just enough to keep it from dripping, which somehow made him look smaller, more human, less defended. He stood under a cone of yellow warehouse light and tried very hard not to shiver. Around him, Roman's men occupied the shadows without speaking. Cal stood off to the side, coat-buttoned, expression flat. Roman walked in slowly, the echo of his shoes carrying through the open space. He wore black wool and leather gloves. Nothing dramatic, nothing theatrical. He did not need a costume for what he was. Daryl lifted his head at the sound. For half a second, hope tried to return to his face. Hope that this might still be a conversation. Hope that money or pleading or legal language might matter in a room like this. Then he saw Roman clearly and the hope went out again. Mr. Holloway, he said too fast, this has gotten out of hand. Roman stopped 10 feet away. Daryl licked his lips. The men in the park, that was a misunderstanding. I only wanted her brought back before she got hurt. Roman said nothing. Daryl kept talking because silence was worse. She's a child. She doesn't know what she says. She tells stories. She gets dramatic. You know how kids are. Nothing. She belongs with family. Roman's eyes sharpened at the word, but his face remained still. Daryl rushed on. I have legal papers. I have custody. If someone convinced her I was some kind of monster, then that is unfortunate, but I have rights. Roman reached into his coat and removed a manila folder. He did not open it at first. He only held it loosely in one gloved hand. Daryl's breathing changed. Roman finally spoke. Do you know what this is? Daryl swallowed. No. This is your life. Roman opened the folder. Paper shifted in the light. Bank records, state support transfers, loan summaries, screenshots, photographs, statements. Do you want to hear it from the beginning? Roman asked. Daryl's voice cracked. I think there's been some confusion. Roman began anyway. You married Tessa Bennett 3 years ago. Within 6 months of moving into her house, the calls to neighbors about shouting started. Within 8 months, Lily stopped attending school consistently. Within a year, support payments intended for her food, clothing, and care began disappearing into betting accounts and private gambling debts. Daryl's face lost what little color it had left. Roman turned a page. You owe $184,000 to 3 different lenders. 2 of them have already put men on your trail. One of them has a habit of removing fingers before asking a second time. Daryl looked at Cal as if he might find mercy there. He found none. Roman's voice stayed level. You assaulted your first wife in Providence. She withdrew the complaint and vanished across state lines. A bartender in South Boston says you've spent the last 6 months asking what a healthy girl around 6 years old might fetch if the right buyer could be found. Daryl shook his head too quickly. That is not what I said. Roman ignored him. You locked Lily Bennett in a basement. Repeatedly. You beat her with a belt. You burned her with cigarettes. You starved her, and when she escaped, you attempted to recover her as property. Daryl's knees softened. One of Roman's men stepped forward just enough to keep him from dropping all the way to the floor. Roman drew one more sheet from the folder, the screenshot of the text from the park. Take the girl. Don't bruise her face. She is worth more clean. He held it where Daryl could see. This is your number. Daryl stared at the page and then looked up with wet panic rising in his eyes. I was angry, he said. I was drunk. People say things. Roman's gaze did not move. Daryl tried again. I never meant to sell her. Roman took one step forward. The entire warehouse seemed to pull tighter around the sound. She is 6, Roman said. That was all. The words landed harder than shouting would have. Daryl's mouth trembled. Please. Roman stopped in front of him. Do not make the mistake of asking me for anything. For a second, even Cal looked away. Roman closed the folder and handed it to one of the men behind him. Then he nodded once toward the side entrance. A man in a dark overcoat stepped in, carrying a slim leather case and a portable metal clipboard. Roman's attorney. Gray-haired, narrow-faced, precise. The kind of man who had spent 20 years making terrible things legally irreversible. He set the case on a crate, opened it, and removed a stack of prepared documents. Darryl stared at him in disbelief. Roman spoke without turning. "You are going to sign every page put in front of you tonight." Darryl's eyes darted over the papers. "What is this? Guardianship relinquishment. Admission of fraudulent use of state support funds. A statement acknowledging your role in arranging the attempted kidnapping of Lily Bennett. A no-contact agreement for the rest of your natural life." Darryl shook his head. "You can't force me to sign." Roman looked at him. For the first time all night, something like cold anger showed in full. "You misunderstand the shape of this room." Darryl stopped breathing for a second. Roman continued, "I do not need your signature to bury you. I only need it to save time." The attorney placed the first document on the clipboard and uncapped a pen. Darryl's bound hands twitched behind him. Roman nodded toward one of the men who stepped forward, cut the zip tie, and moved back. Darryl rubbed at his wrists, looking from the pen to Roman to the warehouse door, as if some last avenue might open. None did. "What happens if I sign?" Roman's answer came immediately. "You leave Boston tonight." Darryl blinked. Roman continued, "You disappear. You never say her name again. You never come within 100 miles of her. You do not write. You do not call. You do not send anyone in your place. And if I don't," Roman's voice dropped another degree, "I hand your debt file to the men you owe along with your current location and the text message where you priced a 6-year-old child by the condition of her face." The air left Darryl in a small broken sound. He looked down at the first page. The attorney tapped the signature line once. Darryl signed. His hand shook so badly the D in his first name looked like it belonged to someone twice his age. Page after page followed. Roman said nothing while he wrote. The scratch of pen on paper carried through the warehouse like insects moving in dry leaves. By the time Darryl reached the final affidavit, sweat was sliding from his temple despite the cold. He signed that too. The attorney gathered the pages, checked each line, each initial, each date, then slid them back into the leather case. "It is done," he said. Darryl looked up at Roman with eyes emptied by fear. "Please," I signed. Roman considered him for a long second. Then he reached into his coat and pulled out an envelope. He handed it to Cal, who passed it to Darryl. Inside was a passport, a one-way ticket to Mexico City, and enough cash to get a man lost if he understood the gift correctly. Darryl stared at it. Roman said, "Your luggage will be sent wherever you land. The rest of your debts will not follow if you remain invisible." Darryl's mouth opened, closed, opened again. "You're letting me go." Roman's face did not change. "No, I am choosing not to finish it myself." Cal escorted him out an hour later in the back of a black SUV. The airport was nearly empty at that hour. Just cleaning crews, red-eye passengers, a bored clerk at a coffee stand, the fluorescent hum of a place too awake to be night and too dead to be morning. Darryl stood on the curb outside Terminal E, clutching the envelope in both hands. His tie was gone. His collar hung open. He looked less like a man than like the outline of one. Roman stepped out of the SUV last. The cold air off the harbor cut across the drop-off lane. Darryl looked at him and took one involuntary step back. Roman stopped close enough that the words did not need to travel. "If I ever hear her name again," he said, "I will know where you are before the person you are hiding from does." Darryl nodded too fast. Roman went on. "If you ever come back, there will be no papers, no ticket, no conversation." The fluorescent lights turned Darryl's face the color of wet ash. "I understand." Roman held his gaze until the man looked away. Then he turned and walked back to the SUV. He did not watch Darryl go inside. He did not need to. By the time he returned to Velvet House, dawn had begun loosening the edge of the sky over Boston. The building was quiet in that particular way. Expensive places only ever were at 5 in the morning, every polished surface emptied of performance, every light softened to necessity. Roman climbed the stairs without waking anyone. On the 3rd floor, Lily's door stood slightly open. Elaine had left it that way for him. He stepped inside. The room smelled faintly of lavender soap and the last heat of the radiator. The bedside lamp was still on. Mopsy lay crooked beneath Lily's chin. She was asleep in the corner again instead of the bed, wrapped in the red coat with one hand tucked under her cheek. Roman crossed to the chair near the wall and sat down without making a sound. For a while he only watched her breathe. Children should not sleep like that, he thought, curled tight, ready to flee in dreams. The city outside began to pale. A truck shifted gears on the avenue below. Somewhere in the kitchen, Frankie had arrived and started coffee. Lily stirred. Her brow tightened, her fingers curled into the blanket. A small, worried sound escaped her, not quite awake and not fully asleep. "Mr. Roman," she murmured. He leaned forward. "I'm here." Her breathing steadied. He sat back. For the first time in 20 years, Roman Holloway let himself imagine something beyond protection. Not just keeping danger out, building something in its place. A room with the lights on. New boots lined by the door. Books on the table. A child who stopped apologizing before she asked for water. His hand slid into the inside pocket of his coat. The relinquishment papers were there, folded clean inside a sealed document sleeve. Not warm exactly, but real. When Lily woke, she found him where he had been all along. Still in the chair. Still in yesterday's clothes. Still there. She pushed herself up slowly, hair-mussed cheek marked from the seam of the coat. "You came back." Roman looked at her, the winter blue of morning filling the room around them. "Yes." She studied him for a long moment. Then she asked the question as if she did not quite dare to believe in the answer. "Is he gone?" Roman reached into his coat, drew out the document sleeve, and placed it on the rug between them. "He signed everything." Lily looked at the papers but did not touch them. "What does that mean?" "It means he has no right to come near you again." Her eyes lifted to his face. "Ever, ever!" The word settled slowly in the room, heavier than fear and quieter than hope. Lily's mouth trembled. Then very carefully she crawled out from the corner and crossed the rug to him on her knees. Roman did not move. She climbed into his lap as if the action surprised her even while she was doing it. He put one arm around her and held on. She rested her head against his chest and listened to his heartbeat for a long time before speaking again. "I think I believe you." Roman closed his eyes once. When he opened them, the sun was touching the harbor glass beyond the curtains, and somewhere downstairs, the first real sounds of the kitchen had begun. He sat with Lily in his arms and the signed papers on the rug between them, while the city woke around Velvet House, and the life she had run from finally began to lose its claim on her name. From that morning on, the building began to breathe differently around her. Not all at once. Healing never moved like that. Lily still startled at loud footsteps in the hall. She still slept with Mopsy under one arm, and a blanket tucked so tightly around her that Frankie muttered she was trying to disappear into the fabric. Some nights she woke before dawn and checked the lock twice, then a third time just to make sure. Some mornings she stood in the kitchen doorway and simply watched before stepping in, as if part of her still expected the room to belong to someone else. But little by little, the old habits loosened. The bread under her pillow disappeared first, then the apple slices she used to hide in coat pockets, then the sugar packets tucked into the rabbit's torn seam. Frankie noticed every one of those absences and said nothing, which was one of the ways he loved her. Elaine noticed the rest. She noticed that Lily no longer asked where she was allowed to stand in a room, that she sometimes reached for a book without first asking if she was permitted, that she had begun leaving her crayons spread across Roman's office rug like a child who believed she would be there tomorrow to find them again. Cal noticed when Lily stopped flinching at the sound of men's voices coming up the back stairs. He noticed when she walked beside him through the service corridor and did not automatically drift toward the wall to make herself small. He noticed when she asked if he wanted to learn a new version of their ridiculous handshake and looked offended when he pretended not to remember it correctly. Nora noticed the weight returning to her cheeks, the steadier pulse, the better color under the skin, the way pain no longer lived in every breath when she turned too fast. Roman noticed everything. He noticed the first night she fell asleep on the actual bed without realizing it. The first time she laughed before checking whether the sound would cost her anything. The first time she argued with Frankie over mushrooms on pizza with the ordinary confidence of a child who assumed disagreement would end in annoyance, not violence. He noticed when she started waiting outside his office at the end of each afternoon. Not knocking at first, just standing there with Mopsy in one arm and a book tucked to her chest, listening for his voice inside. When he began opening the door before she could work up the courage, she acted as if this had always been the arrangement. She would climb into the chair by the window, or curl on the rug by the bookshelf, or sit on the leather sofa with her knees tucked under one of Elaine's cardigans while he worked through ledgers and calls and legal documents. Sometimes she read aloud in a halting, soft voice, sounding out words that fought her on the page. Sometimes she colored. Sometimes she only wanted him in the room. Roman learned to work around that need the way he learned everything important in his life. Quietly, thoroughly, without asking it to become easier before it was ready. At night, after Lily had gone to sleep, he met with lawyers. The first hearing was procedural, then another, then home studies and financial reviews and interviews with people who had spent their careers trying to decide whether strangers were safe enough to be called family. On paper, Roman Holloway was a complicated man, unmarried, private, wealthy beyond ordinary explanation, owner of Velvet House and several other entities that looked respectable enough until someone followed the paper trail far enough to realize respectability was not the same thing as innocence. None of that frightened him. What frightened him was the possibility of a woman with a clipboard and sensible shoes deciding that his love would be measured against the shape of his life and found too unconventional to count. The social worker assigned to the case came on a Wednesday afternoon. Her name was Margaret Ellis. She wore pearl earrings and a camel coat and carried a leather portfolio fat with forms. She had kind eyes which Roman mistrusted immediately because kindness in official settings was often only another method of assessment. Elaine met her at the entrance and brought her up. Frankie baked before she arrived. Nora timed one of her routine visits to overlap. Cal disappeared entirely, which had taken considerable negotiation because Lily was used to him being somewhere in the walls. Roman told him the presence of a 6'4" security chief with a broken nose might make the interview feel less domestic. Cal had muttered something unprintable and retreated to the basement office. Margaret sat with Lily first, not in Roman's office. In the small library off the third-floor sitting room where Elaine had placed a basket of books, 2 cups of tea, and a plate of shortbread no one touched. Roman waited 2 rooms away with his hands in his pockets and every muscle in his body drawn too tight. He could hear nothing through the closed door. That was the worst part. Margaret stayed in there for 42 minutes. When she came out, her face was composed but softer than before. Lily followed with Mopsy tucked under one arm and a sheet of paper in her hand. She went straight to Roman as if the room itself had arranged around that instinct. He looked down. She held up the paper. A drawing in red, yellow, and blue crayon. A big square house with too many windows. A kitchen. A rabbit in the corner. A tall, dark figure beside a small blonde one under a yellow sun that looked too bright for Boston. Across the bottom, in letters Elaine had helped her practice, was written, "Home." Roman took the paper and looked at it for a long moment. Margaret watched him. "This is where you feel safe?" she had asked. Lily Roman would later learn. And Lily, without any hesitation at all, had answered yes. Margaret met with Nora next. Nora spoke plainly. About the injuries, about the malnutrition, about the improvement in sleep appetite and eye contact, about the pacing of trauma, about how safety was not cure, but it was the ground cure needed to stand on. Frankie was less measured. Frankie cried. He cried only once and not in any theatrical way. Margaret asked when he knew Lily had started believing she would stay, and Frankie looked down at his flower-scarred hands for a second before answering. The morning she stopped asking if she was allowed to have seconds. That was all. But it was enough. Elaine's testimony came in cleaner lines. She spoke about consistency, about structure, about the child's increasing ability to tolerate routine, about Roman's refusal to rush trust or force affection, about the way Lily looked for him in every room and the way he never made her earn being found. When Margaret finally sat with Roman in his office, the late afternoon light was already turning harbor gray beyond the windows. She opened her portfolio. "You understand," she said, "that adoption is not rescue." Roman leaned back in the chair and looked at her with the same stillness that had dismantled stronger people than her. "Yes, it is not gratitude. It is not protection alone. I know. It is a permanent legal and emotional obligation to a child whose history will not disappear because she has a new address." Roman's gaze did not shift. "I know that too." Margaret studied him for a long moment. Most people flinched under that kind of official scrutiny. Roman did not. He simply waited, which was somehow more unnerving. "She is attached to you," Margaret said. Roman's expression changed so slightly another person might have missed it. "She is attached to this place," he said carefully. Margaret closed the portfolio. "She asked if she could keep your last name." That landed harder than anything else had. Roman lowered his eyes for half a beat and then looked back up. "When?" "This afternoon." The room held that sentence between them. Margaret rose a minute later. At the door she paused. "I have seen homes with better optics," she said. Roman said nothing. She added, "I have rarely seen a child look less afraid of tomorrow." Then she left. The hearing was set for 6 weeks later. Those weeks moved strangely. Fast in the paperwork, slow in the heart. Lily knew a decision was coming, though no one loaded her with language she did not need. Elaine called it court day. Frankie called it official business and promised to make a cake whether they won or lost, because some days demanded sugar regardless of outcome. Nora kept her hands gentle and her voice matter-of-fact. Cal checked the schedule as if a judge might change her mind based on traffic conditions. Roman did not speak about the possibility of failure. Neither did Lily. But one night, 3 days before the hearing, she came to his office barefoot in flannel pajamas and stood in the doorway with Mopsy hanging from one hand. Roman looked up from the legal papers spread across his desk. "Why are you awake?" Lily shifted her weight. "What if she says no?" Roman understood at once which she. He set the papers aside. "Come here." Lily crossed the room and climbed into the chair opposite him. She was still small enough that it swallowed her from the shoulders down. Her braid had half come loose. She looked younger in pajamas, softer, more like the age she had been forced to skip. Roman sat in silence for a moment. In another life he might have lied, might have said there was nothing to worry about, that adults in robes always made the right decision in the end. He knew better than that, so he told her the thing he could promise. "Whatever happens in that room," he said, "you are not leaving Velvet House." Lily searched his face. "Even if she says no?" "Yes." "You promise?" Roman leaned forward, forearms on the desk. "I do." She let out a breath she had been holding in places too deep for lungs. Then, because she was still a child and fear did not erase curiosity, she asked, "Will I have to wear itchy shoes?" Roman almost smiled. "Number." Court day arrived in a pale wash of winter sun over Boston. Elaine dressed Lily in a soft blue dress with tiny white stitching at the collar, a cardigan the color of cream, tights. The red boots replaced with polished black flats that were, according to Lily, only a little itchy for important reasons. Elaine braided her hair twice before deciding the first version did not do justice to the occasion. Frankie tied a miniature navy ribbon around Mopsy's neck and announced that no member of the family would appear before the Commonwealth looking sloppy. Cal wore a dark suit that made him look like a dangerous man attending a funeral against his will. Nora wore charcoal and pearls and the sort of expression she reserved for bad diagnoses and men who lied to her face. Roman wore black. Of course he wore black. Not because it was court, because it was him. The courthouse itself was smaller than Lily expected. She had imagined marble columns and echoing chambers from the picture books Elaine had shown her. Instead, it was polished wood fluorescent lights, softened by age benches with too little comfort in them, and hallways full of ordinary footsteps. Lily sat between Roman and Elaine while attorneys moved in and out of side rooms with folders under their arms. She held Mopsy in her lap and watched everything with the wary alertness she still wore in new places. At one point, she leaned toward Roman and whispered, "Do judges always look so serious?" Roman followed her gaze to the courtroom doors and said, "The good ones do." She considered that, then nodded as if she had learned something useful. When they were finally called in, the room was smaller than Roman expected and somehow more difficult because of it. Nothing hides in a small room. Not fear. Not longing. Not the shape of a child reaching for a man's hand under the bench. Lily's fingers found his as they sat. He turned his palm upward and held on. The judge was a woman in her 60s with silver hair, sharp eyes, and a manner so calm it made everyone else aware of their own nerves. Her name was Judge Miriam Stone. She reviewed the file in silence first. Pages turned. Pens moved. The court clerk shifted documents from one stack to another. Roman sat very still. Lily's feet did not reach the floor. Nora testified first. Then Margaret Ellis. Then Elaine. Then Frankie, who managed not to cry this time until he spoke about the first morning Lily called his kitchen our kitchen and then had to remove his glasses and ask the court's forgiveness. Even Judge Stone's mouth softened at that. Roman was questioned about his finances, his home, his routines, his obligations, and the practical structure of Lily's care. He answered clearly, directly, without embellishment. He did not pretend to be a simpler man than he was. No one in the room used the words whispered about him outside it. No one asked what power looked like when he was not wearing it publicly. That was not the task before them. The task was Lily. At last, Judge Stone looked over the file and then over her glasses toward the front bench. "Lily Bennett." Lily straightened. The judge's voice gentled without ever becoming patronizing. "Do you understand why you're here today?" Lily glanced once at Roman, then back at the judge. "I think so." The judge waited. Lily swallowed and tried again. "To see if I can stay." Judge Stone gave one small nod. "And what is it that you want?" The room went quiet in the particular way rooms do when the truth is about to come from the smallest person in them. Lily looked at Mopsy's ribbon, then at Elaine, then Frankie, then Nora, then Cal, who gave her a look so solemn it nearly counted as encouragement. Finally, she looked at Roman. He did not nod, did not prompt, did not rescue her from the need to answer in her own words. Lily took a breath. "I want to stay with Mr. Holloway." Judge Stone leaned back slightly. "Why?" Lily thought about it with terrible seriousness. Because for her questions had always mattered. "Because he stays when he says he will," she said. No one in the room moved. She went on stronger now that she had started. "He doesn't get mad if I'm scared. He doesn't make me earn food. He doesn't hurt me when I make mistakes. He lets the lights stay on when I need them. And when I have bad dreams, he sits by the wall until they go away." Judge Stone's eyes lowered briefly to the papers before her and then back to Lily. "Anything else?" Lily's fingers tightened around Mopsy. "He makes me feel like I don't have to disappear." The silence after that was not empty. It was full. Judge Stone took off her glasses. Roman looked at nothing and everything all at once. When the ruling came, it came simply, cleanly, with no music, no spectacle, no dramatic pause long enough to be cruel. The petition was granted. The court recognized the adoption. The required signatures would be entered. The child would leave that building as Lily Holloway. Lily blinked once as if the judge had spoken in a language she needed an extra second to understand. Then she turned toward Roman with huge, disbelieving eyes. "That means," his throat worked once before sound came out. "It means you're mine." She stared. Then very carefully, for real, Roman rose from the bench and knelt in front of her right there in open court without the slightest regard for who saw him do it. The same way he had knelt in the snow. The same way he had knelt by her bed. The same way he had always chosen to meet her where she was instead of demanding she climb her way up to him. "For real," he said. Lily made a sound halfway between a laugh and a sob and threw herself into his arms. This cry was different from all the others. Not fear, not relief alone. Something larger, stranger. The body's astonishment at finally being allowed to keep what it had prepared to lose. Roman held her while the courtroom blurred around them. Frankie openly wept on the bench behind them. Elaine turned her face and failed to hide the tears anyway. Cal looked at the ceiling like a man enduring sniper fire and muttered Jesus under his breath. Judge Stone pretended not to hear. By the time they returned to Velvet House, night had fallen over the harbor. The front windows glowed gold against the cold. Inside, the restaurant had been transformed. Frankie had done more than bake a cake. Of course he had. There were white flowers on the tables. Warm lights strung in the private dining room upstairs. A banner in deep blue across the far wall that read, "Welcome home, Lily Holloway," in Elaine's exact handwriting because no one else had acceptable standards for lettering. The staff had gathered in their best black uniforms, pretending with no success that they were not waiting by the doors to see her face. When Lily stepped in and saw it all, she stopped moving. Frankie emerged from the kitchen carrying a cake shaped like a rabbit wearing a tiny red bow. The room broke into applause, not loud enough to frighten her, just enough to hold her up. Lily looked from one face to another, Frankie beaming through suspiciously wet eyes, Elaine with one hand pressed lightly to her throat, Nora smiling at last, Cal standing in the back with his arms folded, somehow managing to look both protective and deeply uncomfortable about feeling anything in public. Then she looked up at Roman. He had not let go of her hand since the courthouse. He looked down at her now, as if the answer to every ruined thing in his life had somehow arrived in red boots and a blue dress with a rabbit under one arm. Lily's fingers tightened around his, and softly, almost as if testing the shape of it against the air, she said, "Dad." The room vanished for Roman. Not really. He still saw the lights and the flowers and the people who had become the walls around her life. But all of it went distant for one suspended second, while that single word moved through him and found every place that had once been buried under loss. He bent, kissed her forehead, and answered in the voice she trusted most. "I'm right here, sweetheart." Frankie set the cake down before he dropped it. Someone laughed. Someone else clapped again. Lily smiled then. A real smile. Open, bright. The kind that had no fear standing behind it with folded arms. She turned toward the room and let them celebrate her. And later, much later after the cake was cut and the last plate cleared and Frankie had threatened physical violence against anyone who tried to save the top tier for tomorrow after Elaine carried the flowers upstairs and Nora went home and Cal checked every exit one last time out of habit more than necessity. Roman found Lily in the doorway of her room. She had changed into flannel pajamas. Her hair was half loose from the braid. Mopsy's ribbon had slipped sideways. He leaned against the hall wall and looked at her. She looked back. "Will it feel different tomorrow?" she asked. Roman considered the question the way he considered any serious thing. "Yes," he said at last. She waited. He pushed off the wall, crossed to her, and knelt so their eyes were level. "Not because you have to be different," he said. "Because you don't have to wonder anymore." Lily stood very still. Then she nodded as if she understood that better than most adults ever would. Roman tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. "Bed." She smiled. "Yes, Dad." This time the word came easier. She went inside. Roman paused in the doorway a moment later and looked in on her before turning off the light. She was in bed already, not in the corner, with Mopsy under one arm and the blanket loose instead of gripped tight. The room was warm, the curtains half drawn over the harbor lights, Elaine's books stacked on the nightstand, a glass of water within reach. Lily looked up as he stood there. "Will you still be here in the morning?" Roman rested one hand against the doorframe. "Yes." "Promise?" "Yes." She settled against the pillow. Then, because happiness had not erased caution completely, and maybe never would, she added, "You said that before." Roman felt something like a smile touch the corner of his mouth, and I was right. Lily's eyes drifted closed. When he came back in the morning, she was still there. So was the light. So was the room. So was the life that had against all logic and expectation become theirs. And down in the kitchen, Frankie was already burning the first batch of toast because he was talking too much again, while Elaine complained about frosting on linen, and Cal stood near the service door pretending he had no interest at all in the sound of a little girl running down the hall calling for her father.